Welcome to the Kettering General Hospital podcast with me, your host, John Levers. Like many NHS hospitals and organisations across the country, we like to celebrate our colleagues, especially those who have worked for the NHS and our hospital for a long time. We recently held our celebration of service event, marking colleagues who had served for 25, 30, 35, 40, 45 and 55 years either at our hospital or within the NHS. Colleagues were invited to the KGH Board Room where they were welcomed with refreshments and treats. They were then presented with their special commemorative gifts by members of our executive team, including Debbie Needham, our hospital CEO. During this podcast, we'll hear some of the stories from people who have been at KGH for many years. We'll hear how they began their career, the best parts of their working life, and just why our hospital is so special to them. We start off with Sarah and Julie, who through their working life at KGH have known each other for 25 years. I'm with Julie and Sarah, and before I started recording, they're having a little bit of a bicker about where they fitted into each other's stories because one recruited the other. Let me start off with Julie. Julie, where do you work?
I worked in general surgery for nearly 50 years.
Nearly 50 years, blimey.
I started off in maternity and then finished the 50 years in general surgery.
And what have been some of the highlights of your career over the past 50 years?
I think it really has been just the people I've worked with. The job's been varied. When I started, my boss was chairman of the BMA, and I typed all his speeches. When he went to meet Margaret Thatcher, I did all those speeches, and it was great fun.
Now, I was expecting you to say that one of your highlights was recruiting an apprentice.
It was a real landmark because I'd been fighting for years to get one, and then finally got permission and interviewed and appointed Sarah straight from school at 16.
So, Sarah, you've been at KGH for 25 years, appointed by Julie as an apprentice. How did that feel when you got that first job?
I hadn't looked at hospital work as a form of career. Our school didn't promote hospital work, so it was all a bit of luck really when I went to the training broker here in Kettering. And then I'd finished school on June the 13th, I was here by July the 14th. I was placed with Julie and we clicked instantly. And I completed 2 years apprenticeship training with Julie and some excellent people that they taught me everything I know really.
I have to add, when Sarah started, we couldn't have a chair or a desk for her. She used to do all her work sitting on the floor. Cross-legged on the floor.
That's a health and safety nightmare.
For a long time.
Yes, I was the new version of desk sharing and hopping with the floor most of the time.
And Julie, you mustn't have any regrets about recruiting Sarah 25 years ago.
We had a really good relationship and she would often come up with suggestions as an outsider. Have you thought of doing this? And well, it really gave you a free hand, didn't I, to reorganise anything that she thought would help us admin-wise, and that gave her something for our logbooks and did a lot of good for us. Yes, she was the best one we ever had.
Hello, I'm Kim Attlee. I'm the head of midwifery and I've worked at this trust for 36 years this month. Okay, so I came here directly from school, so having finished my A-levels at 18, I came here and started as a student nurse, worked for a short period as a staff nurse, and then I did my midwifery training here and I was employed by the trust all the way through that. Then started as a staff midwife, have worked my way through various positions as a midwife and now currently I'm head of midwifery.
When you reflect back on your 36 years, how does it feel being in the shoes of that student nurse to being where you are now?
I'd love to go back and tell that 18-year-old, this is where you're going to be in 36 years' time. I don't think I would have believed it when it all felt so big and overwhelming. But yeah, I feel quite proud of the fact that I've worked here and, progressed up and now can be in the position of head of midwifery and the importance of that role.
What have been maybe some of your career highlights?
It's just been a really enjoyable career as a midwife and working through all the different areas of midwifery and at one point I was case holding in the community. I worked for many years as a delivery suite coordinator, so just lots of midwifery experience which have on the most part been very positive.
Hello, my name's Michael Panter. I am the mortuary manager at Kettering General Hospital and I've been there for about 25 years, something like that. Initially when I started, believe it or not, I was a small boy. I was a domestic, actually for domestic services, as a stopgap job. And they actually needed a stopgap person just for an interim period of a couple of weeks. and did some intensive training just to do some basic work, shall we say. Some basic work. And did that. Did the help for the cover for a 2-week period. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing. It's ticked a few boxes. Never entertained the idea of actually taking it on as a job at all. I was going to move on to better, grander things. And then, as I said, as the system was different in those days, when word of mouth and jobs advertised on the backs of office doors and things like that, a consultant actually said to me, why don't you please apply for a job here? And I thought, well, I'm doing nothing else better than this. It is interesting enough. So I took them up on their kind offer, and I started work then as an anatomical pathology technician, an APT. So I did a few years of in-house training with the consultants, off to London and all the rest of that jazz. First set of papers, another couple of years after that, same again, in-house training, and you're fully qualified. And then slowly but surely, worked my way through the ranks to becoming manager, believe it or not. So we do tend to look after the living as much as we look after the deceased. It's a lovely little department. We've only got 4 members of staff that run the whole thing. It's a very positive environment, as you might guess. And we'd like to think we pass on that the positive energy out of the worst thing in anybody's life.
During their time at Kettering General Hospital, some colleagues have seen changes to the hospital itself. Christine Alderman has been working for the NHS for 50 years, the majority of that at KGH. I asked Christine to tell me more about her time at KGH.
I've worked in the NHS since August 1972, mainly at KGH, but I've worked at St Mary's and I did a time at Northampton General.
So you've been working for the NHS for 50 years. Where did you start your career?
It used to be called hospital admin then, with the hospital secretary way back in the day, really sort of old-fashioned office. It was just a hospital secretary and he just had an admin team, and basically we did all the admin for the hospital.
So you must have seen quite a change over those years.
Yes, big changes. Yeah, I saw all this hospital be built. We were on the commissioning team for the building, so there's been a big change. When I first started, it was just like the old block, literally the old block. A&E was there, but none of the new block. And this Glebe House was a nurses' home, and Thorpe House was a nurses' home, and Warren Hill was the sisters' home. And we owned most of the houses up Rothwell Road. They were doctors' accommodation because I worked in medical staffing. So,
And of course you've seen all these buildings being built and being changed for their purpose. And of course now we've got HIP 2 and we're having a new hospital built.
Yeah. So big changes, but I won't be here to see that.
Claire Russell is a community midwifery sister working for the Kettering area, and after a varied career in medicine, Claire is celebrating 30 years at Kettering General Hospital. Today's event is taking place in Glebe House, and Claire, you were telling me earlier on that this used to be the nurses' accommodation.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, as you moved around your unit you were doing, whether you were doing your surgery and your training or whether you were doing your midwifery, your intensive care or geriatrics, you moved around whichever nurse's home was allocated to that block. So I started off in Thorpe, St Mary's and back to Glebe House, and they were all nurses' accommodation in those days.
Young ladies all living together. You had a warden as well. Were they quite strict?
Very strict. We had our little ways round it. If you were on the ground floor, you were very popular. It wasn't so bad in Thorpe House, but we used to have a warden in Warren Hill, as I remember, and you had the garden. It was lovely, and had a big sitting room there as well, so everybody used to gather up there in the evening if you weren't in the social club. And
was it very strict about bringing friends back to the nurses' accommodation?
Yes, it was. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like geriatric now, but it was, and it was security as well. So as an older person now, I can understand it. At the time, it was like, we'll get around this. And we did. We behaved ourselves very well.
Now, you were saying you've got 30 years continuous service within the NHS, but as a family, you've got much more than that.
Yes, I've got 3 sisters, and we've all worked at Kettering. And my mother also, lost mum 20 years ago, and she only had a year's retirement, but she was a healthcare assistant at St Mary's for 30-odd years. My older sister was a midwife as well, and she retired. My next sister down is a radiographer. She's still working part-time. Then I came along, and then my younger sister works for ICT, And so it's all been Kettering. It must be 140, 150 years.
Hi John, I'm Paula Kirkpatrick, I'm the Group Chief People Officer.
So we're at the Long Service Awards today. Why are these important?
To the individuals who've worked in the NHS and in particular at Kettering for such a long time and the contribution they've made to the care of patients in this hospital, it is essential that we recognise that contribution, and you can tell the pride that people have got in being here today, having the opportunity to have a quick chat with Debbie. It's lovely to see how important it makes people feel, and so it should, given all that they've given to the hospital and the NHS.
Paula, you've been chatting to people today as they've been waiting to receive their awards. What kind of things have you learned?
I have been so taken aback, impressed by the stories I've heard from colleagues around how long they've worked here. Most of the colleagues I've spoken to have done their whole career at Kettering, and that passion to work in their local hospital, their dedication, completely takes me away. They've been, inspirational, and everyone's had really interesting career stories to share as well.
We've heard how many people began their careers with the NHS, many beginning them at KGH. I asked colleagues today what keeps them at Kettering General Hospital. For many, apart from delivering excellent patient care, it was all about the friends that they've made.
I would just say the colleagues, the friends and the banter. That's been the highlights.
I've always enjoyed working at the hospital, and I've always found it friendly, supportive. I've never had any problems, and the teams I've worked with have all been good. Yeah.
Because I like working here. I like working at a district general, the size of the hospital. I feel like I know people, I have contacts in almost every department, I have relationships, and it's just a warm, nice trust to work in.
One of the best bits is meeting my very good friend Lisa, who's here today. She's also celebrating 25 years. So if I hadn't have gone to the unit, I wouldn't have met Lisa. One of my highlights, being part of a big family. I still believe KGH is a big family. And lots of people are related to each other, but the ones that aren't are like your extra family.
And your husband works here too. Did you meet here?
Yes, we met here back in 1997 as well. My husband trained as a biomedical scientist.
Our very own KGH love story there from Sarah. It's a little bit like Love Island, isn't it? As well as people telling me their career stories, we also heard of additional talents from colleagues, including Michael, who's the mortuary manager, and through the pandemic, he was helping to raise staff spirits in the Care Cafe.
Oh, yes. There was another lovely young doctor that's moved on to greater things, Sonny Bottali. We used to do a little music sort of get-together in the We Care COVID Cafe, and it was a privilege. No pressure, and it's absolutely lovely. So that was actually I got more benefit probably from it than other people, because I was then able to bring a guitar to work and actually sing and play gently. From a safe distance, of course. And
thank you to everyone who attended the Celebration of Service Awards at Kettering General Hospital today. We celebrated 168 colleagues with a combined total of 4,920 years of NHS service. Amazing stuff. I really hope that you've enjoyed the stories that we've heard today from our KGH colleagues across their many, many decades of service. Thank you so much to everyone who chatted to me at the special Celebration of Service event at Kettering General Hospital recently, marking those big anniversaries of your working life, and for those people who shared with me their stories, whether it was about the people that they've met, the excellent patient care, or just why our hospital is so special to them. I've been your host, John Levers. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of the KGH podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe so the latest episode pops directly into your inbox. This has been a production of the Kettering General Hospital Communications team.